I briefly looked into Anglicanism and Lutheranism. In fact, remember, I was getting ready to potentially go to seminary even.
Yeah, I remember that.
And the biggest red flag for me was just how overrun these high church Protestant churches are with progressivism.
Yeah.
And, you know, this is something that I think a lot of people come to realize when they start to get more and more high church. They're like, why is it that all the highest Protestant churches, like Lutheranism, the Methodist Church, Anglicanism, they're all the most overrun with progressivism? That's a red flag.
Yeah.
You know, you will know them by their fruits.
Hi, thank you for being here. Don't forget to click that subscribe button. Please give us a thumbs up if you do enjoy this content, and click that bell. You'll get notifications of all of our new content immediately. A lot coming your way. And please prayerfully consider becoming one of our Patreons. You'll get exclusive access to uncut, unedited, complete episodes, as well as early access to all of our content. Thank you so much, and we hope you enjoy the rest of this video.
Let's talk about, you know, kind of where we were at in, you know, 2022, 2023 timeframe. So I was deployed in 2022 studying church history. And, you know, your brother was still on this journey. He was, you know, in the Roman Catholic Church. Your parents started heading that direction too. And
a little after.
Yeah, a little after that.
Yeah.
And so you were living at home up until, you know, obviously we got married in early 2023.
Yeah.
And so at this point, we were both kind of already asking questions, right? When you and I got married in February of 23.
I feel like I started asking questions before we got married. It was, I don't know if it was when you were deployed or when we were definitely engaged.
Yeah.
But I remember being at that non-denominational church. I don't even know if my brother was at the Catholic Church yet or if he was just attending the Presbyterian Church. But my whole family was still non-denominational at this point. And I just remember there was this distinct moment, and I have no clue why it sparked in my mind, but it just is like, you know, God just kind of was tapping on the light bulb again in my head. And I remember like the worship music was playing. It was very emotional. And I was already
This was at which church?
The non-denominational church.
That your parents were going to, or the one that we were going to?
Before we got married. So my family was going to this besides my brother. And I was just, I don't know. It's like the music was going on and I just started asking questions. Like, I wonder if this is the peak of Christianity in America. Is it Protestantism, you know, that changes and every church is different and you just have to keep hunting? Because at this point, after we left our Baptist church, we had been to like 7 different churches. We eventually were doing, you know, church online, doing TV church because we just couldn't find a place. And so that was the first question I asked. And then, you know, it was like, is this the same faith, you know, that the apostles had? Like, I remember asking that question, like, is this how the apostles worshiped? And I don't believe that. I don't believe they had their guitars and their tears and their Hillsong. You know,
their coffee shop.
You know, their coffee shop, like they're in, you know, $50, you know, branded T-shirts. I just didn't think that was the roots, you know, the root of the church. And so, you know, I after that I started wondering, you know, how did we get so far?
Yeah.
And then, you know, I asked those questions. I had that uncomfortable feeling in my chest of you know, just overwhelm of, oh my gosh, I need to start learning everything. Thank God I have men in my life who are, you know, kind of make the process easier. But
at that point, it was mainly your brother.
My brother, and I know my dad was asking questions too. And I have another brother who was really, really big into history. So he was kind of the little ortho bro before anybody else. Before anybody else officially. When my family took that detour into Catholicism.
Yeah.
Which was only about like a year and a half.
Yeah.
He was like diehard, like.
Yeah, he's the unsung hero of this whole thing, is because he would send all of us like all this Orthodox propaganda. Like he would send us like Orthodox edits.
200 like gigabyte file of memes.
While we were Protestant, or like while your parents,
while we were like, you know, still inquiring into what's true.
Yeah. So we can kind of pick it up when we in 2023, you know, we got married, and I was going to a non-denominational Reformed-ish church. And you know, at that time, you know, I didn't feel uncomfortable with that church at that point yet, in that early 2023 time frame. But you you expressed some things to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't remember everything I expressed to you, but some things do come to mind. I mean, the people there were really great.
Yeah.
Which you'll find that at most Protestant churches. Like, community is the center of the church, you know, aside from the Bible and the gospel, but community is like the ultimate priority in Protestant churches, I feel like.
Yeah.
So the people were great, but, you know, the flip-flops and board shorts on stage were a little off-putting. The gluten-free communion was a little off-putting. Aside from the, you know, emotional music, I did think it was weird that I'm like, if this is supposed to be the Eucharist, which we didn't call it that, but if it's supposed to be communion, then why is it gluten-free? Like, wouldn't this be a holy thing? So those were kind of the things. And I think I still had those questions in the back of my head that this just isn't, you know, how the apostles, this is not the faith that Christ left us.
Yeah.
Or at least the church. It's remnants of the faith, but it wasn't the church.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that kind of, you know, I started to get on board with that as I was in, you know, continuing in my church history journey. I started to realize how ahistorical, you know, a church like that truly is. You know, particularly, you brought up the sacraments, you know, particularly the Eucharist, you know, and just the way that it's gone about. I don't think they mean to do it in a disrespectful way, but you know, you put it very elegantly, you know, and it is, you know, at the end of the day, you know, it is disrespectful, obviously, to the sacrament, and it's not even aligned with the way the Reformers viewed the sacraments. And this was actually the first thing. In some ways, this was the first domino to fall for me as far as leaving Protestantism. Was what did the Reformers themselves teach, right? And if you remember, it was infant baptism. Remember, you know, that was really why we became Presbyterian.
Well, that's another thing my brother pushed us on.
Yeah.
He's like, you need to baptize your babies. And I'm like, I'm married. You need to talk to my husband.
But God was simultaneously working on me with that particular issue. That was and I think for a lot of people, infant baptism in many ways is that first domino.
First one.
Because it's like, okay, gosh, you know, every reformer believed in infant baptism. Luther, Calvin, even Zwingli believed in infant baptism. And so I was looking at that and I was like, man, like what are we doing here? Like, not even the reformers agree with us. And if you remember, we were on a road trip and I was listening to the John MacArthur, R.C. Sproul debate on infant baptism. R.C. Sproul obviously was in favor of infant baptism. John MacArthur was opposed to it. So that was why we became Presbyterian. And you know, talk about maybe like what was your kind of experience at first at the Presbyterian Church, because we liked it a lot at first when we got there. Yeah.
Again, you know, community there was probably the best I've ever experienced compared to all of the other Protestant churches I've ever been to. I think the size had to do with that, but I think what I also really liked is when you walked in, it felt very traditional from a Protestant perspective. You know, some of the older generations, they might say, or even younger generations, they might say it's kind of, you know, was a little dusty, but it, you know, it had the beautiful creaking wood floors and the pews, and, you know, our pastor wore the kind of their version of the liturgical garments. So there were a lot of remnants of tradition for the Protestant faith. I liked that they called it, didn't they call it like a homily? Or, it was like a homily, and
they would sing the Trisagion,
the Nicene Creed.
And I remember Pastor Adriel. He's awesome, by the way, and he really holds to tradition as much as the PCA allows him to. He has a very high view of tradition, and the first sermon he gave that we were there for, he quoted St. Augustine, and so. You know, I was I was stoked about that. Yeah, when we got there, I was like, let's go, you know, quoting St. Augustine. So, you know, we really enjoyed, you know, especially at first.
And they also had like icon like pictures on the pamphlets that they'd hand out. So that was also something. And then they had the stained glass which it wasn't it a Lutheran church?
Yeah,
so
they were using
I don't think they were supposed
church
to have, you know, operate in a building with.
Well, it's funny because
it was beautiful.
Yeah, it's funny because there's actually in the church there's a big icon in the back, which is funny.
Glass icon,
traditional Presbyterians are. No, I'm talking about the icon that was in the back of the church.
Oh gosh, I don't remember that.
and traditional Presbyterians are iconoclastic.
Yeah.
So, but because it's a Lutheran church that they were operating in.
Yeah. So we really got as close as we could. I know you entertained Anglicanism for like a tiny bit, but then we just couldn't.
Yeah, we were just creeping, higher and higher church. And I think, I distinctly remember we were out to dinner one day. I don't know if you remember this. It was we were at our favorite Italian restaurant.
Okay.
And I remember you using the term pseudo tradition. Like that was what you felt like this church was. It was like they're trying to have tradition, but it's a pseudo tradition. And this was about 6 months in. We were confessional Presbyterians at this point. And it was like close, right? But it just wasn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't everything that we were looking for.
Yeah.
Just briefly on the Anglican thing, I briefly looked into Anglicanism and Lutheranism. In fact, remember, I was getting ready to potentially go to seminary even.
Yeah, I remember that.
And the biggest red flag for me was just how overrun these high church Protestant churches are with progressivism.
Yeah.
This is something that I think a lot of people come to realize when they start to get more and more high church. They're like, why is it that all the highest Protestant churches, like Lutheranism, the Methodist Church, Anglicanism, they're all the most overrun with progressivism? That's a red flag.
Yeah.
You will know them by their fruits, right? And so that was a huge red flag for me.